under any circumstances. Here in this province, Mr. Speaker, we all agree that deficits should not be run. We also all agree, Mr. Speaker, despite all the rhetoric in this House, that raising taxes is not an option for the people of Nova Scotia. But that only leaves two fiscal possibilities, Mr. Speaker, and one is that we will ride a wave of economic growth and that provincial revenue will grow simply because the economy is growing. But nobody seriously suggests, Mr. Speaker, that we are in that kind of a world. So there's only one left, one possibility left, and that is making difficult decisions about program spending. And Mr. Speaker, here are some of the areas that are within the provincial government's control on which we are looking for decisive consultative leadership from the government. First of all, Mr. Speaker, on pensions. Nova Scotians are very worried about their pensions. Whether it is a public pension or a private pension, everybody is deeply concerned about what the future holds. We are looking for a clear signal from the government about what its intentions are. We would like to see the government convene a forum of pension stakeholders so that there can be a complete sharing of information about the state of pensions in Nova Scotia and a full discussion about what the options are for dealing with both public and private pensions. We read, Mr. Speaker, that a number of large corporations have approached the federal government saying that they desperately need help in the funding of their pensions and the relaxation of some of the funding rules. If that kind of thing is necessary and is being asked for in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, it needs to happen in the open, not behind closed doors. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, I said earlier that Nova Scotia has no power over the banking system, but there is a very important element, Mr. Speaker, of the banking system that is entirely within the province's control, and that is credit unions. We would like to see the government meeting with credit union stakeholders and delivering clear, precise information to credit union members about the health of the credit union system in Nova Scotia. That is 100% within the control of the provincial government. Third, Mr. Speaker, there is currently and will continue to be a problem with access to capital by municipalities, utilities, and other public service agencies. Money is tight around the world, and we would like to see the government take decisive leadership in helping municipalities and other public service entities in ensuring that they continue to have access to the money they need for cash flow and also for the funding of capital projects. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, the government does have control over the nature and timing of public works projects. We have seen, for example, Mr. Speaker, in British Columbia, that an element of the government's plan to deal with the financial crisis is to move forward certain public works projects, the idea being that earlier spending on projects that were already planned will prime the pump of the economy. We are looking for a statement from the government of what public works projects can be considered for moving forward in time or otherwise changing or improving in order to provide that kind of strategic and effective public spending that we are looking for, Mr. Speaker. Fifth, we are looking for the government to make a public statement about how it is going to use its economic development budget in the most strategic way possible, Mr. Speaker. Because of the decisions that we all agree on public finances and the limited options that are available, once you rule out deficits, once you rule out raising taxes, the options available are very, very few. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, it is critical that the government's spending have a laser focus on what will provide the best return on investment, what is the most strategic, what will be the most effective way to leverage the public spending that there is in order to help us deal with this financial crisis that is on the verge of washing over us, Mr. Speaker. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, a good example of that is the bioscience building that the government recently announced. That is an excellent example of strategic public spending, Mr. Speaker. We would like to see more of that, or even better, Mr. Speaker, we would like to see where that kind of spending fits within the overall government plan, Mr. Speaker. The bioscience building is a good thing because it will provide, it is an immediate public works project of a significant size. It is a strategic investment in Dalhousie University and the intellectual resources in Nova Scotia that will be leveraged into more economic development in this province. Mr. Speaker, the insurance industry is within the control of the provincial government as well as the federal government. We must never forget that our insurance companies are large financial services companies. They have been and they will be affected by the global financial crisis. The large Dutch company ING, as we all know, Mr. Speaker, is currently facing financial turmoil and has had to seek a large bailout from the Dutch government. ING is one of the largest casualty insurers, property and casualty insurers in Canada, Mr. Speaker. It is inevitable that this financial crisis is going to have an impact on the insurance industry, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure I don't need to remind the government that it was in the wake of the bursting of the technology bubble in the year 2000 that led to the insurance hard market, that led to the turmoil in the auto insurance industry across the country and in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, in the period 2002-2003. There is no reason to think that things will be any different this time. Mr. Speaker, consultation is needed now, not because it is easy, but because it is difficult. Consultation with stakeholders is needed as an essential element of the government's plan moving forward, whether it's on pensions or credit unions or insurance or access to capital by municipalities or public works projects, Mr. Speaker. Leadership in this case means bringing people together, sharing information with them, making sure that people realize the challenges that we are facing and the limited options that are available to us. Because, Mr. Speaker, what will not work, we can be sure of this, what will not work is the government simply announcing decisions to Nova Scotians and expecting them to accept them. We know, as the government knows, that difficult choices are going to have to be made. Difficult medicine is going to have to be administered. And we can do this, Mr. Speaker, in one of two ways. Either the doctor can simply order the patient to take the medicine, even though the patient doesn't understand the reason and the rationale, or the doctor can sit down with the patient and say, this is what's going on, here's the prognosis, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here are all the various options, and you and I need to work together to decide whether this medicine or some other medicine is best in the circumstances, Mr. Speaker. That is not typically the way of this government. This government, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, has demonstrated a rather obsessive secrecy. The idea that they and only they get to be in on the making of decisions. Mr. Speaker, we are facing a kind of financial crisis that we have never faced before in our lifetimes and which we may never face again. It is for that reason that we are saying to the government, you must do business differently than the way you've done it before. We have never faced anything like this in our lives. We have never faced anything like this in this House. Business as usual. Partisanship, sniping, distorting facts and figures to make it look like it's the best boat anybody ever saw or the worst boat anybody ever saw, Mr. Speaker, counts for nothing when the wave is over your head, about to break over your ship. We are ready to work with the Liberal Party and with the government in order to engage in this kind of consultation and collaborative decision-making that is needed, Mr. Speaker. We are ready, and our question to the government is the government ready? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honourable member from Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to rise in my place this evening and to acknowledge the other parties for the opportunity to debate and to comment on a crisis that is gripping the globe, impacting on our country, and that we are certainly starting to see here in our province. There's no question, however, that government policy that has gone on over the last 4 or 5 years can be a contributing factor to even a greater decline than what some other provinces would experience, and I'll speak to that a little bit as I go on. It is interesting that the prophetic member from Digby Annapolis talked about the coming recession last spring. In fact, he used the D word, and I remember when he talked about a possible coming depression, I remember how the Minister of Economic Development took keen interest in what he was having to say. But it is not the experts out of Harvard or Cornell or any of the universities that I first heard about a coming recession. And the member from Musquodoboit Valley would be pleased to hear that, in fact, it was a former student of mine who is now a trucker and who owns a little trucking business, 2 transport trucks that he has driven across the country for the past 25 years, from Ontario to the state of Washington and the state of Oregon. And last October, he called me on an issue of a little development that he has locally, and he said, "Watch out. Watch out." He said, "I am beginning to notice that I am dropping off less and less at the Home Depots and the lumber yards in Washington State and Oregon." And he said, "What is about to hit us is going to be pretty significant." That was last October, before we heard from any of the experts, a trucker who saw perceptibly just a little change that was going on. I'd like to speak tonight about our primary resource industries, areas where I feel policies that, if they had been put in place some years ago, would lessen the impact that is taking place right now. And I want to reference agriculture first, because Indianapolis Valley and in Kings County, where I represent one of the ridings, agriculture is still a significant employer, but more importantly, a significant and traditional way of life. And in fact, 25% of all jobs are still directly and indirectly given from agriculture. This summer, we heard from GPI Atlantic, and the minister is well aware of this, one of the most discouraging reports on agriculture that has come our way. So we've had a lead-up of difficult times in the primary industries to what is now gripping us in a more severe manner. And hopefully we can put in place some things to turn the corner. But in the GPI Atlantic report, they talked about in Nova Scotia, when it comes to unemployment and supplementary unemployment statistics, that the average unemployment rate really is 14.3% for Nova Scotia. And of course, we know in rural areas that is even compounded further. And to put this into raw statistics, in 2001, there were 7,500 jobs in agriculture in Nova Scotia, and in 2006, 4,700 jobs in agriculture. So the most dramatic loss in jobs in Nova Scotia's agricultural sector have actually occurred in the last few years. And that's why I feel that we need to be talking about farm viability plans, helping to stimulate young farmers who are entering the farm way of life, the farming sector. But we haven't heard anything like that to help them bridge the gap from a small entry amount of dollars to where they could become viable. The Kelco report, a great piece of work that even if we did it on an experimental basis with one or two commodities, could put money back into the pockets of the farmers. The local food economy, it's made some progress, but we know this year it didn't get the kind of work and advertising and education that is going to change the pattern of Nova Scotians. These are ways in which we could enhance that industry. 5 years ago, in forestry, we were told by the Forest Products Association of Nova Scotia and by small woodlot owners that we had to change our practices. We couldn't put all our eggs into one or two baskets, into the pulp and paper and into lumber for the U.S. market. We needed to diversify more. We needed to go value added. We needed to find new markets since we are in a global economy. Those are things that we haven't done strong enough in Nova Scotia that would help us through this downturn. And there's no question that, again, the same for fishery. We're hearing this fall that some fishermen, in fact, are likely to tie up their boats and not engage in one of the most lucrative industries of all, and that is the lobster fishery in southwestern Nova Scotia and around the province. And once again, our tourism is down in Nova Scotia, and in some parts of the valley, some of the even bed and breakfasts closed their doors earlier this year than normal because business and the movement of people hasn't been as strong as what they saw in other years. This is a time when I would encourage government to be looking at a winter works program. If there is a way of taking some dollars from some programs, put into a winter works program, it not only will employ a number of Nova Scotians in all of our 18 counties, and we have 13 that in fact have been experiencing a downturn. We only have 5 counties that are growing their population and therefore have good economic viability. We have 13 without. What a year to find some dollars to put into a winter works program. It'll put people to work, but more importantly, it creates a psychology of optimism that we can have for people who are without work. And that's one of the areas that I feel that we can do something very, very strong about. So as we contend and deal with the crises on us, we do have, I think, a chance for all of us in this House to collectively work on the things that we can change. I know I am hearing from more and more Nova Scotians about their fear of a nearly 10% increase in electricity rates. These are breakpoints. These are tipping points for the average Nova Scotian. And all of us here, as some of my colleagues have talked about, is collectively gathering our ideas, gathering the political will to make a change in the coming months in what is a difficult time for what we call the average Nova Scotian. And the majority of Nova Scotians fit into that category. So while we have a crisis, there's also opportunities to lessen the impact on many Nova Scotians. We don't want to see our welfare lines grow, our unemployment go up, but we know that is a real possibility. Small construction companies are already talking about having laid off 1 person, and will lay off 2 through the winter. Retailers are starting to see a change in their monthly incomes. Michelin, one of the first times I've ever heard at Waterville, Michelin, took a longer period of downtime at Labor Day weekend and are going to have the longest Christmas time holiday ever. So those are the things that are coming at us. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this time.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the Honourable the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I initially wasn't anticipating to speak to this matter, although I understand it's an important issue, and I'm thankful to the leader of the third party for bringing this to the attention of the House today. I think it's a great opportunity for us to talk about a number of things. I might take a different course than has been taken in the debate earlier. I want to specifically talk about my constituency and the community that I live and represent. But before I do that, I want to talk about a few statistics. Mr. Speaker, I know it's been said here today about the job growth in the province of Nova Scotia. 457,000 people are employed in Nova Scotia, among the highest on record, Mr. Speaker. Since September of 2007, approximately 10,500 more people are working in Nova Scotia. Year over year, our unemployment rates have decreased by 0.3%, and our labour force has increased by 2%. Mr. Speaker, I have had the good fortune to be at a number of government announcements where we've been there alongside of business to help grow this province. And I can tell you, one specific announcement was held here in Halifax. The Premier was there, the Minister of Economic Development was there, and it was an announcement to introduce a new company to Nova Scotia, Butterfield Bank International. And at the time, we had an opportunity to speak with some of the representatives from Butterfield Bank. And one of the concerns that they raised there, speaking directly to MLAs and others, was the availability of commercial space. Now, we know the decision that was recently made by the municipality and the 5 decisions in advance of that, declining other applications for development. But, Mr. Speaker, Butterfield Bank, I never thought much more about them until a week or two ago, 3 weeks ago. I was coming down the elevator from my office, and the door opened up on the floor below our offices. And we're located in the Summit Place. And you would all know, members here would know, that less than a year ago, the Daily News had their offices in Summit Place, and they vacated that office with their business decision to change their business model. But at the same floor where the Daily News was, just months ago, is now Butterfield International. The full floor is occupied. That building is now renovating for another tenant, Mr. Speaker. And it speaks to the health of our economy here in Halifax, here in Nova Scotia. When our office went out to tender to locate enough space for our office coming together, the new Department of Health Promotion and Protection, we went through the process through Transportation and Public Works. They issued a public proposal for space, and Mr. Speaker, in all of the buildings and all of the so-called vacancies that exist in Halifax, only one landlord submitted a proposal. There was only one landlord in Halifax that had enough space and enough capacity to fill our need. So for members of the opposition, for members of council, and for others to say there isn't an issue in Halifax around commercial space, I would submit they're absolutely wrong. Mr. Speaker, I speak to a number of constituents, and recently I've had the opportunity to go around talking to constituents as part of my duties as an MLA. One of the things that I do is I reach out to them to talk to them, ask them about their concerns, and see if there's any way that I can work towards helping them. I spoke to a business owner in my constituency who operates a small real estate business and a bulk transportation business. His biggest issue is that he isn't able to take a day off. And he's not able to take a day off because he isn't able to hire an employee. He has been looking for truck drivers, Mr. Speaker. They come, they go, but they don't stay. They often seek out and get jobs, other jobs. But, there's a guy who works 80, 90 hours a week who's built a business from nothing, from ground up. He bought a truck while he was employed with another company, and he went from 1 to 2, and 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. Now he has, I think, 6 trucks. He has 4 or 5 pieces of heavy equipment. He owns several pieces of real estate all over the past 3 years. And he has, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 employees. And his biggest concern now is his ability to hire and retain employees. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about a personal conversation that I had with my son, and I hope he doesn't mind. My son's 22 years old, and he lives at home, or lives on his own. And he happens to work for Boston Pizza, a new business that opened up in Sackville 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. My son went to work for Boston Pizza as a kitchen helper at Boston Pizza. He wanted to work there. He liked the atmosphere. He liked the process of the store where people were interested in sport, recreation, that kind of stuff, and his friends were working there. He went to work there as a kitchen helper. He's now the kitchen manager of the restaurant. The other day, he called me. He said, "My concern, Dad, is that I can't get people to work." His biggest concern right now in life, a 22-year-old, is that he can't get people to work. He's working 80 and 90 hours a week so that restaurant has the right amount of people working to serve their community, Mr. Speaker. It's something that concerns me as a father. And in fact, I understand his concern because I look around my own community and I see everywhere I go help wanted signs. It's without a doubt one of the biggest concerns that we will face in the near future. I had the opportunity to talk to officials with one of the larger employers in my community. Now, it might surprise some. My community is predominantly bungalows and split entries, two-story homes and subdivisions, very little industry, but we do have one industry that seems to be thriving in a suburban area, and that is the forestry industry. I represent the community that is home to Cape Cod siding. I represent the community that's home to Barrett Lumber, and I also represent the community that's home to Hefler Lumber. And in addition to those companies, there's also companies within my constituency who are involved in forest harvesting and that type of industry. But I had the opportunity to speak to officials, senior officials at Cape Cod Siding, and I said to them, I was intrigued by the fact as I drove by your business that you had a large 4x8 sign, not advertising the products that you want to sell, advertising for employees. The response was clear. He said, we pay good money, we have good benefits. It's good work, it's hard work, it's honest work. And he said, our challenge is getting people to fill those jobs. Mr. Speaker, that's why our government, and I'm so proud of our government, invested over $100 million in our community college system. And if any member of this House and any member of the public has taken the opportunity to go across the harbour and see the new facilities there, and see the new facilities in the constituency in Stellarton, and across this province where they've made investments in our community college system, you will know that we've recognized this as being an issue, and we have in place a plan to deal with it. Mr. Speaker, I have only 2 minutes left. I want to talk about two more companies that I visited and people that I have come across. One is Pratt & Whitney. I had the great opportunity to be with the Premier and with the Minister of Economic Development at Pratt & Whitney a month or two ago, just a few months ago, as Pratt & Whitney recognized the need to adjust their business model. They identified where a product was available, where they could develop to look to new markets, and our government saw fit to be an investment partner in that particular project. I will tell you that the people who work in that plant are the people who I went to school with. They live in my community, and they value those jobs. They like those jobs, and they're the hockey moms. They're the soccer dads. They're the people who invest back into the community through volunteers, and that's why I was proud to be there that day as we made that announcement, that investment in that solid Nova Scotia company. And now, my final point is to somebody who I consider a friend. It's about somebody I consider a friend. His name is Michael Duck. Michael Duck is the guy who invented the machine that squirts the coffee into your cup. Sure shot. The cream into your cup. He also invented a machine that puts coffee in your cup as well, and he invented a machine that puts oil on a pizza pan, and he's gone on and on and on and on. He now has a factory in my community that employs over 100 people. Michael Duck saw some changing conditions in his marketplace. He diversified his product. He diversified his business, and he made his business so that it wasn't just about one machine and one item. And he went from a business of one person in the basement of his house to a factory employing over 100 people in our community, Mr. Speaker. He is a hero in our community. He's done great jobs for the province of Nova Scotia, employing people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honourable member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank the leader of the third party for bringing this debate forward. And, you know, I've heard and agree with much of what the government has said today about some of the success stories and the entrepreneurs that have made them happen. But part of the reality, I should say, of this debate tonight is to be able to give them the economic protection to stay in business and to grow their business, Mr. Speaker. You know, what we're looking at here is not like who set up business in Nova Scotia even this summer and who did it a few years before that. The problem is since that time, the very great wrath of economic pitfalls have come from the United States. Now, for a long time, it was often said when the United States sneezes, we catch a cold. But I think in this instance, if we don't watch, we're going to get pneumonia. You know, we're in really, really tough times here. When we look at these companies that the government has talked about and the ability to help them to get capital to grow it, and that's really what the problem is here, Mr. Speaker. It's not about who has the best imagination about who took what company to Nova Scotia or who prospered a year ago, who prospered 6 months ago. The reality is this financial crisis has befallen us since late summer and continues to grow. And it's not something that's peculiar to North America. It's throughout Asia, it's throughout Africa, it's throughout Europe, Mr. Speaker. So these financial times are coming down on us all. Now, you know, a year ago, if we had been talking about bringing, I guess the Premier, when he talks about financial groups are coming to Nova Scotia, that's great. Imagine a year ago if he had said to us that Lehman Brothers was coming to Halifax. We would have, at that point, I think to a person would have been, wow, this is a deeply rooted company. It's been around over 140 years. This is the type of people we want to come here. Well, you see what happens to them. You look at Bear & Stearns, same thing. This isn't even, and I hasten to use the word even, like the tech bubble when that burst. Because many people were saying, well, these were companies that were a couple of years old, and it is the reality. Are they sustainable companies financially? Is this the real value when some of these companies were trading at $125, $130 a share? Was this the real financial capacity of that company? Well, we found out very quickly that these startups were just that, startups, and the real value of these companies was probably around penny stocks. But nonetheless, here we are. And that ripple was felt in the late 90s, early this millennium, Mr. Speaker, felt through the community. But now we're seeing the failure of huge banks. Banks and insurance companies like AIG and Wachovia, these, if they're not failing, they're being taken over at bargain basement prices. You know, the television show, the Coronation Street, the Duckworth family used to have a great line that they would never go into the stock market because the stock market is like bingo for the rich. And some of that is very true here, Mr. Speaker, because what we have are people, these experts telling us for years that it's fine, you know, whether it's any of those large companies. Again, had we been told that AIG was coming to put a head office here in Nova Scotia, we would have thought a year ago or 6 months ago that was a great investment. But here we are. So we as a party aren't here today to debate whether the financial position that the government has put us in, whether that's good or it's bad. What we want to debate today, and I believe it was the intent of the leader of the third party, was, look, folks, we're all in this together. This is a huge problem. Now, we can outline it from the perspective of these large financial companies, but really, when the rubber hits the road, it's back in communities like mine and Reserve and Dominion and the Waterford, where, you know, there's people who are been displaced workers from steel plants and coal mines and just getting by on fixed incomes. And they're the ones, you know, they're the last ones to benefit when the economy is good. But really, they're the very first ones to feel the effect when the economy goes south on them, Mr. Speaker. And they're the ones that we have to make sure that when we talk about the larger perspective of what's happening in this financial crisis, and be sure it's a crisis, that we know that these folks are looked after. Because what we're looking at here, you know, we've heard a lot of the words pushed around today describing the political position of parties being socialist and whatever. But what we're talking about here, Speaker, is not what old-fashioned term you want to use to describe a party or whatever you want to do. What we're talking about here are real Nova Scotians who will be feeling the effect of this economic downturn. And what should we do as a government? What is our collective responsibility? And a responsibility that I know myself, and indeed the leader and the rest of this caucus, take very seriously when we say to government and to the Liberal Party that we want to work together collaboratively on this. Because all Nova Scotians will win. Mr. Speaker, there's certain times, Mr. Speaker, that, you know, we have to rise above the political rhetoric. There are times that we have to realize, I don't care, you know, what my political stripe is. I do care about a senior citizen that's going cold, a veteran that doesn't have enough money to put decent food on their table, Mr. Speaker, the infant child that's not warm this winter, and that child's mother doesn't have enough wherewithal to feed and clothe that child. Those are the things I think, no matter if you consider yourself right, left, centrist, up or down, Mr. Speaker, that's not what we're debating in this House today. We're debating a crisis that's facing the international financial world, that to play the game of we attracted this person, we attracted that person, that is of no value to those people. The real value, Mr. Speaker, will be whenever this passes, and it'll pass, that this House is respected by Nova Scotians, because collectively we did the right thing. We didn't yell and scream at each other across the way. We did not take the low road that, Mr. Speaker, no, you know, and I hear some because that's fine. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm talking specifically about this issue. I'm talking about being one of the biggest mouths in this House, Mr. Speaker. But on this issue, I'm ready to put that in my back pocket and work for all of Nova Scotians across the aisle, Mr. Speaker. This is bigger than all of us. So, Mr. Speaker, that's what I look forward to doing. And I'm sure the majority across the way look forward to doing that. We believe that there is a way out of this mess. And the way out is not about name-calling, but it's about working together. So everybody wants, I don't care who leads that train, Mr. Speaker. The Premier is the Premier for Nova Scotia, first and foremost. And he should be leading us, and that's what we have to do, Mr. Speaker. We have a long, tough winter coming on both probably, I know financially and probably weather-wise. So we should work together to make Nova Scotians proud and tell them that we're going to work our way together out of this mess so all Nova Scotians can move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Time has expired for debate in tonight's emergency debate. I want to, before we close, I want to thank all the honourable members for having taken part in tonight's emergency debate. Motion for adjournment was already made earlier. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.